Evelyn ma'am, I have shared a picture with you. Can you please check the picture, ma'am? Is that fine? On your WhatsApp.
On my WhatsApp, let me look at it. Yes.
I'm starting the session, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the AOSR Value-Based Radiology webinar. Now I request Dr. Evelyn ma'am to start the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, even good night. And welcome to our first AOSR Value-Based Radiology webinar on the theme of the connected radiologist. Be inspired by our 3 dynamic radiologists on how to do more and be more in radiology. And don't forget to join our panel discussion with our speakers and our very special guest, Dr. Charles Goh. So we have our speakers, Dr. Geraldine McGinty, Dr. Chantsalsuren Galbaatar, and Dr. Angelica Robinson from both sides of the international date line, as well as Dr. Charles Goh from Singapore, who is our very special guest because he is very much involved in training of residents. Just for the next slide, please, Sarita. Just a few housekeeping rules. There's only one main one, which is to post questions in the chat box for the panel discussion. The more you post, the better. And at the end of the whole session, please fill in the feedback form. We will flash a QR code at the end of the talks before the panel discussion starts so that you have the link to the feedback form. Otherwise, please check your chat box so that you can get a link to it, and we will send you a participation certificate. So without further ado, I will now introduce Dr. Geraldine McGinty. So Dr. McGinty is currently Senior Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs, Professor of Clinical Radiology and Population Health Sciences, Weill Cornell Medicine. She has been teaching healthcare leadership in the combined Weill Cornell Medicine and Cornell School of Business Executive MBA program. And she was also a past president of the American College of Radiology in 2020 to 2021. And in 2018, she was chair of the ACR's Board of Chancellors and the first woman to hold this office. She is an internationally recognized expert in imaging economics. She was chair of the American College of Radiology's Commission on Economics, and she's also on the American Medical Association's Relative Value Update Committee from 2012 to 2016. So who better than to talk about the visible radiology? Geraldine, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ho. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. Good morning, good evening, and I'm excited to talk to you about the topic, the visible, and I would also say the valued radiologist. And I have a couple of disclosures, none of which are relevant to this talk today. So my story starts with a signature. In 2010, then President Barack Obama signed into law the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. And with this piece of legislation, our $4 trillion healthcare industry aimed to refocus on preventive and primary care and on a transition from volume-based payments to value-based payments. As radiologists, we already were facing a lot of payment cuts and criticism of some significant increases in imaging utilization that had happened in the early part of this century. And it was clear that in the climate of a post-Obamacare signing, we were being seen as the problem. Radiology was a cost driver, dragging down the system and preventing that shift to more preventive and higher value services. And we spent a lot of money on healthcare in the US, almost 20% of our national output. And unfortunately, we don't get the kind of results if you look compared to other developed economies who spend less. Our results, our patient outcomes are much worse. So we definitely need to do something different. And we realized that in all of the discussions about how to improve American healthcare, we weren't in the conversation. We had really become invisible. Why was that? Well, as you know, as radiologists, innovation is in our DNA. From 1895, when Röntgen discovered the X-ray, all through all of the multiple innovations that we've seen, we became digital. We adopted a digital environment long before our other physician colleagues adopted electronic health records. And we continue to innovate with continued changes around artificial intelligence. But in our excitement about innovation, especially around digital storage of imaging, digital sharing of imaging, we had really taken ourselves away from the clinical care setting. We were able to read images anywhere, and we were busier than ever. So we were indeed invisible in this very important discussion about how to deliver higher value healthcare. Now, let's be clear, people really do value radiology. This is an article from our premier health policy journal in the States, asking physicians, what do you think are the most important medical innovations? And you can see MR and CT scanning made it to the top. People truly understand that these innovations have revolutionized medical care. But in Mini, when we started this journey in 2012, you could see only half of patients even knew we existed as physicians. So, and when you think about that, it was clear we had to do something different. So we started a campaign back in 2012 that we called Imaging 3.0. We really were referencing Web 3.0, the idea being that when the internet started, it was really something that was, it was out there, you saw it, you consumed it. And now, by the time we got to 2012, we were already on Facebook and Twitter, and we were able to create and actually able to reshape the internet. You could argue that hasn't gone particularly well, but bear with me. So we said, look, we want to reframe how people think about radiologists. The statement up there at the top right, our goal is to deliver all of the imaging care that is beneficial and necessary, none that is not. That wasn't really a statement that we had been clear about as radiology. We'd seen a lot of, as I say, increased imaging utilization. And honestly, all of us were seeing referrals for imaging that we knew weren't particularly well justified, but often because we were busy or because some misaligned financial incentives, we did that imaging. So we clearly had to reset the perception and reset our culture. So as we look to the future of imaging as more visible and valued radiologists, we had to start with culture change. So, again, we had to reframe the discussion. When you Google our radiologists and you see that the top two, are radiologists even doctors? Are they even medical doctors? It was clear that not just our patients, but our referring physician and other provider colleagues needed to understand the value that we brought. Now, I will say that as we thought about talking to patients, and I know that Dr. Robinson is going to spend more time on this, that was a pretty controversial topic. At RSNA in 2013, we had a tweet chat about this topic. Should radiologists be talking to patients? Many people felt, that radiologists are the doctor's doctor, that we should only talk to other physicians. They told us that we should not be talking to patients because they might ask us questions to which we didn't know the answer. I'm glad to say that we included some patients in that tweet chat, and we started increasingly reaching out to patients to ask them what they thought. And the patients gave us a very clear message. They want their results, they want them now, and they don't care who they get them from, but they'd like to be from somebody who can talk to them. Now, fast forward in 2021, we have legislation called the 21st Century Cures Act, which now means we are required to give our imaging to patients. That can be problematic. What we often see these days is our patients are getting their imaging results before their other doctors are getting it. And as you can imagine, there are some really high pressure and high profile situations, a patient with a new diagnosis of cancer, for example, where that sequence is just not ideal. So we're really trying to work through how we can manage that. But as we thought about reframing our role as a valued and visible member of the care team, we really only had to go back into our history, because as many of us who are older and grayer know, when we were training, radiology was the last place we always stopped when we did ward rounds. We always went down to look at the images with the radiologist. And this is Dr. Mellons, who had a long and successful career at the Brigham in Boston, who said, we are clinicians just as much as every other doctor. The bedside physician sees the man, they practice from the outside in, but we as radiologists, we practice from the inside out. So there was a confidence that we needed to have about our ability to be part of the care team. But let's be clear, change is hard. And especially in the US, where we had a lot of payment schemes and incentives around productivity, we had to show our radiology community that change was possible. So we started telling a series of stories that we called our Imaging 3.0 case studies. We took success stories from all around the country, and I'll just share one from my own institution. We set up a breast imaging consultation service. As you may know, in many states in the US, we have to inform patients of their breast density. And when we started doing this, the law passed in our state in 2015. Patients were confused, they'd never heard this before, and their primary care physicians were also a little bit baffled as to how they would explain, what does breast density mean and what should I be doing when someone has dense breasts? So we set up a consultation service with a professional that we call a radiologist assistant, who's a technologist or a radiographer with extra training. And in collaboration with the physicians, we provided a service where either patients or their doctors could have a consultation and a discussion with us about their breast density, or honestly about anything else on the report. We put a phone number on every report and an email address on every report so that it would be easy for them to contact us. We also made it very clear that we want to talk to patients. So this is one of the waiting rooms in our imaging center, and you can see a screen there. And what that shows is that we want to talk to patients. And by the way, here are the radiologists that are reading today in the various areas. So a very clear sign that we want to talk to you. So culture change was only one piece of this. We also had to think about how we could use data and information to make it easier for us to obviously deliver value. This had a number of forms. Most importantly, it was our appropriate use criteria. What's the right test to do in what clinical situation, which we took from being in a PDF and not particularly usable to a decision support system embedded in the electronic health record. We also strengthened our registries, built new registries for things like lung cancer screening, made it easier to transfer data from individual facilities, and started doing the kind of research and supporting clinical trials that would allow us to derive the best imaging for the future. And then lastly, we had to think about payment policy. And honestly, that's the one we've really probably struggled with most. When we think about the incentives to do the right thing, to shift more towards value, we have to be very aware that in the US, again, many radiologists are paid on a productivity, almost a per click basis. With more work than ever, that's leading to a lot of burnout. And I think we really know we have to do something different. But most of the payment schemes are more focused on incentivizing primary care. We've been it's been a little difficult for us to make that change. So where are we today? Well, I'm very proud of where we are today in terms of that commitment to only doing the imaging that is beneficial and necessary, and to really being more visible with both our patients and with our referring physician colleagues. I'm glad to say that despite Jeff Hinton saying in 2016 that it was time to stop training radiologists, we are, I think, more valued than ever. And as I say, busier than ever. But I think what we're all looking for now is for us to deliver value. I think about myself as a breast imager. I want to spend more time talking to patients. I want to spend more time biopsying, but we're still catching up, getting our screening mammograms back on track after the pandemic. So far from saying, I don't want artificial intelligence, I'm saying, why isn't artificial intelligence reading those screening mammograms so I can do the things that I want to do when I'm seeing patients? We've also have since 2020 a really renewed focus on health equity, realizing that artificial intelligence has the unfortunate propensity to both accelerate and amplify a lot of the biases that are already embedded in our healthcare system. This is an academic from MIT who saw some of the biases in facial recognition algorithms that systematically bias against people of color. So we launched, when I was a president of the ACR, we launched a health equity coalition to really think about how we can reframe not only being valuable, but being valuable and equitable in the care we deliver to all of the patients we serve. And I really want to commend Dr. Ho for taking the, value-based radiology concept espoused in this article by Dr. Brady et al., that we can't just be exquisitely accurate diagnosticians. We have to be able to demonstrate societal and patient benefit. That is value-based radiology. That is the valued and visible radiologist. And I'll end with one piece of work that we did through a Lancet commission, which showed that the value of what we do is undisputable. We looked at the value of imaging infrastructure investment and used some modeling with a team from the Harvard School of Public Health, and showed that every dollar invested in imaging infrastructure yielded a return of almost $180 in terms of lifetime productivity. And so there is absolutely no doubt that we are valuable. We have become more visible, but I would say that we still need to continue to demonstrate our value so that we can continue to shape the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. That was a very concise and yet quite an interesting way of why imaging 3.0. That's the only question I'm going to ask you now before I move on to the next person, so that you can just highlight on why imaging 3.0. I think everybody will like to know.
Sure. So in our minds, imaging 1.0 was that old school radiology where the radiologist was a valued consultant. Everyone knew they had to come to radiology to see the images. So that was 1.0. 2.0 was PACS. We've got PACS now, and we're invisible to the team. 3.0 was our next chapter, where we wanted to leverage the technology, but also be visible in the way that radiologists had always been.
Thank you very much. I think that would help everybody wonder why 3.0. Thank you, Geraldine. We will leave more questions to the end. I will now introduce the next speaker, who comes from a very exotic area of Mongolia. Dr. Galbaatar is a clinical radiologist at the Intermed Hospital in Mongolia, and she may only have completed radiology residency in 2018 in the Mongolian National University of Medical Sciences. However, she is already CEO and co-founder of the Mongolian Medical Women's Association, where she works on empowering projects for women in medicine to develop leadership skills and networking. She also conducts patient education events and hosts regular Women in Medicine podcasts on YouTube in Mongolian. She has been teaching general and medical English to medical professionals since 2016. So let's hear from this very young, dynamic, rising star. Dr. Galbaatar.
I cannot start my video.
I have sent the request, ma'am.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and I am very delighted to be here. And my name is Chantsalsuren. I'm from Mongolia, and I work at Intermed Hospital, which is one of the biggest private hospitals in Mongolia. And as Dr. Evelyn introduced me, I'm a clinical radiologist, same all of you, and I have some experience in research and interest in artificial intelligence and also women empowerment. And the reason why I came here is a little bit different from my main profession, and because now I'm working as the CEO of the Mongolian Medical Women's Association. So first of all, I will introduce about Mongolian Medical Women's Association, and it has started as a Women in Medicine Circle in 2020. At the time, there are only 5 members. In Mongolia, there are over 60,000 healthcare workers, but over 80% of them are female workers. So we increase their collaboration and empower women to create that small circle inspired by Sheryl Sandberg, who is the author of Lean In, one of the bestseller book in the world. And in Mongolia, there are similar circles like Women in Tech, Women in Edu, Women in Mining, and after some time, we found that there is another similar organization called Mongolian Medical Women's Association, which was founded almost 20 years ago. So we contacted with them and united our function and renew and activate their programs, and increasing working together with engagement of medical professionals since 2021. And we are now member of the Medical Women's International Association. Our vision is to increase participation of women in decision-making. There are several missions to empower women, to encouraging their self-esteem and leadership skills, and strengthening professional network. This is the very important part because in our team, there are doctors, university teachers, and nurses and public health workers, also some medical students. So this is very diverse group, and we learn from each other and support each other. Working with them is very easy and very flexible and very nice, actually. And also we're trying to positive changes in work condition and work environment. And here are our main projects: Women in Medicine podcast, mentorship program, and Meet Women Talk. We host a monthly Women in Medicine podcast on YouTube. We invite some leader women as their by their profession and researchers and doctors and some businesswomen, and talked about their career way to encourage the others. And mentorship program, we organized this 2 months event in 2021. In this program, there were eight mentors and 8 mentees participated, and it was very good example of women's collaboration in medicine. And some of their results are one participant, she was on her maternity leave, and she made a career change from her nurse to the part-time university teacher. And also one good example is one participant found her PhD teacher, and also one participant came from countryside, almost 1,000 kilometers. She wrote a project for teenager health education with her mentor, and they supported from the Mongolian ministry, health ministry, and successfully organized their projects in countryside. Yeah, we inspired a lot from this work, and we encourage it to continue our work in future. And also Meet Women Talk is more educational, and we invite researchers and teachers to talk about only one topic, but in last year we extended our Meet Women Talk Meet Women Talk through the country, and we trained some young doctors with popular lecturers and teachers, and the alumni of this program, they organized Meet Women Talk to the patients to prevent diseases. So in last, this is the picture of last alumni of the Meet Women Talk event. In our work, we ensure the active engagement. We organize monthly meetings. Sometimes it can be online by Zoom. And we use Facebook and YouTube channel for our connection and social media. And international collaboration is very important, and we're seeking to international collaborations and even local collaborations, and we collaborate with Australian Interplast organization, and also Medical Women's International Association. Also, the multi-sectoral engagement is very important and essential to every single project, what we are aiming. And so why engaging colleagues in other medical disciplines is important? It seems helpful to team building, and also increasing effective collaboration and results, and also raise the awareness of some biases such as gender inequality and some disadvantages of every single field and profession and people. Yeah, maybe some of them, how I manage these things as a young radiologist. Here is how I manage my works, and of course the first thing is structuring and prioritizing my works is very important, and also enjoying another important thing is enjoying the work. So I'm very happy to work together with another professionals, not only radiologists and clinicians, surgeons and public health workers and students, teachers. It's very fun and also effective, and so I enjoy to work in this association. And also, supportive work environment is the last and the most important thing. As a young radiologist, I have a lot of day and night shifts and workload. So when you have a supportive mentor and supervisor and colleagues, it would be much easier. If you already have a supportive colleagues, you're very lucky. And if you don't have, maybe we need to try to create that environment. So Mongolian Society of Radiology is also very supportive, and we actively engage in many conferences and meetings. And here is the end, and there is the picture of last Asian Oceanian Congress of 2022 and Korean Congress of 2022. This is the picture of Mongolian big team. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and thank you for inviting me in this lecture to Dr. Evelyn Ho. And it was my great honor to participate all the lectures today. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Chansa. It's really amazing how much networking you have managed with such a good support to enable you to do what you do. But I think the most exciting thing, and I smiled when I heard you say that you're actually enjoying all this. So we will discuss more about this during the panel discussion of how you can actually find so much enjoyment and excitement in working with colleagues from different fields. Thank you very much, Chansa.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to introduce Angelica Smith Robinson, who will be talking about captivating communicator. Dr. Robinson is an associate professor of radiology and is passionate breast imaging radiologist and a very popular public speaker. She's currently director of the University of Texas Medical Branch Breast Imaging and Breast Imaging Fellowship and vice chair of clinical operations, UTMB Department of Radiology. She contributes to resident and fellow education, ensuring a new generation of breast imaging radiologists prepared for the future of medicine, whilst maintaining very rigorous professional standards throughout the entire department. She is committed to eliminating breast health disparities in underserved and minority communities and created the UTMB Cares program, which has provided over 1,000 free mammograms for uninsured women in Galveston County in Texas. Dr. Robinson, please take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and we will start my video. Okay, so thank you for that wonderful introduction. As she noted, I am Dr. Angelica Robinson. I am a breast imaging radiologist, and I am based in Texas, the southern portion of the United States of America, for those who have not visited. I am the director of breast imaging in the Breast Imaging Fellowship, and I have additional administrative roles as the vice chair of clinical operations. But that is enough about titles. Let's get to the fun part of this topic, which is radiology beyond the reading room. So I wanted to see, this kind of piggybacks on what Geraldine was just speaking about. What is the role of a radiologist? So now we have a 2020 study. This study reviewed surveys which were given to patients who had a knee MRI. So the patients had a knee MRI, they were given surveys. Would you like to speak with a radiologist? Do you know what a radiologist is? Do you know what the radiologist did with your specific, in your specific case? So here are very interesting results. Fewer than half, so 47.9% of 48 respondents initially reported that they didn't even know that a radiologist is a medical doctor. So again, this is 2020, and less than half of the respondents even knew that we are physicians. Then I found it interesting that 22% of the 36 follow-up respondents reported that they met the radiologist during their knee MRI. But one patient said, well, I'm not sure. I think I met the radiologist, but I'm not sure. I find this extremely interesting because they did not meet the radiologist during the knee MRI. They met the technologist during the knee MRI, not the radiologist. And if you look at the bottom, this is the link for the study that I'm referencing. So the other results of this study is interesting. So they said, hey, if you want, you can talk to the radiologist, follow up, get additional information about your study. Well, out of all of the patients, and there were about 135 patients involved in the study, only one patient called the radiologist and discussed their MRI results. They spoke to the to the radiologist for 12 minutes. But 6 of 36 follow-up respondents reported that they had indeed contacted the person who interpreted or read your exam. So why do we have that disconnect? Why are patients saying that they did speak with the radiologist, but the radiologists are saying, no, only one radiologist was called? Well, the patients spoke with someone who was a member of the radiology department staff, and the patient walked away feeling that the staff member was the radiologist. So that may have been the technologist, that may have been someone at the front desk, that may have been the scheduler, but the patient walked away thinking that they spoke with the radiologist. The final results that were very interesting was that only a subset of patients, so 46%, only 46% of these patients could correctly state what a radiologist does. So the take-home point for this is that approximately half of patients, or a little less than half, even know that a radiologist is a medical doctor. And then we have 46%, or approximately half, can correctly say what it is that we do. So the question becomes, why does this matter? Well, we do know that in general, humans are typically dismissive of anything that they deem as unvaluable. So if we don't see a value in something, then we typically dismiss it and move along. And that is not what we want for our profession. Secondarily, we know that the general public isn't very well aware of the role of a radiologist. And if they cannot pinpoint what we do, it is very hard for value to be assigned by the general population. Third, it is imperative that radiologists acquire a more visible role in their communities. While we're providing this role, this will allow us to have more engagement opportunities with the general public. So I know that many go into radiology because they do not necessarily want to take a more visible role, but I'm going to give you some just small step-by-step ways that you can get outside of the reading room and start engaging your community. So again, I'm Dr. Angelica Robinson. I have participated in over 50 in-person and or virtual presentations. In terms of the in-person presentations, I have presented to groups as small as 5, and I have presented to groups that are well over 500 attendees. I have participated in newspaper, television, YouTube, Facebook Live, and various similar interviews. I don't say any of this for you to think, well, who cares? I present this so that you can say, I can do this too. And you 100% absolutely can do something just like this in your community. So how did I get started? One, I want you to think about this, start local. You need to start with your local community. I really like how Chantsa in her talk talked about she's working with the local community. She's finding people in her area that are passionate about the same things. So number one, you need to speak about something that you're passionate about. People can immediately pick up on if you're actually passionate, if this is something that you're interested in. So don't just pick a random topic, pick something that you're passionate about. What am I passionate about? I am passionate about uninsured and underserved populations. I am passionate about discrepancies and disparities in medicine, specifically in groups of color. So those are the topics that I personally am passionate about. So those are the topics that I have personally made my sounding board. Number two, you need to find local organizations that have a similar focus. In your community right now, there are organizations who are working on topics that you're already passionate about. That is a great starting point. And number three, you need to create community outreach opportunities that are going to benefit and help your local patient population. So in 2011, when I started at University of Texas Medical Branch, there was a patient who was a donor for our mobile van program. Our mobile van is a a van that drives to various locations, and it has a mammogram machine. And this is used for uninsured patients. So patients who do not have a way to get a mammogram because they don't either have cash or insurance to cover that. While I was at this lunch with her, she said, you know, it just burns me up that on Sunday, that mammogram van is just sitting there doing nothing. I bet we could start using it. And I thought, you know, she's right. I bet we could start using it on Sundays. So what we started doing is I reached out to local churches. Well, why churches? Because this is a gathering place. This is a place where lots of people gather. I started with my own church and said, you know, can we start bringing this mammogram van here to our patient population? And so I would go give speeches, and the speeches would go somewhere along the lines of, you know, you don't have to go to medical school to save a life. If you want to save a life, what you can do is you can bring your friend. If you have a friend, if you have a neighbor, if you know of anyone who does not have health insurance, we will be here at day X. You can bring them and they can come and get a free mammogram. Well, slowly but surely that took off. That program was started in 2011, and we have currently provided over 1,000 free mammograms to uninsured women in Galveston County. This has drastically improved community relations. Why? Because the community knows that we are out there, that we are visible, we care. And it has very much served my passion of helping the underserved in Galveston County. So the picture that I'm showing at the bottom, the woman who is on the right side, she was one of the first people, the very first program that we ever had. She came and she was brought by her neighbor. Her neighbor knew that she did not have health insurance. And sure enough, we found a cancer on the very first program. So she is now cancer-free. You see, she has the big smile on her face, and the other patient on the left went through our second program. So again, this is an example of local community activism that has provided help in our local community. So then we said, well, why don't we expand this program? So now you see on the left, this is a church. It's called St. Mary of the Miraculous Medal. The reason that I have shown this picture is because this is a predominantly Spanish-speaking population. So we started having the applications in Spanish so that we could reach different patient populations. On the right, I'm showing an Episcopal church in Galveston. At the time when this was started, you see I had 3 small children with me. I had 3 kids. They were all small, one still in diapers. But again, getting out there, getting in the community, showing that we care, getting this engagement, that is what was important. As the program expanded, we expanded to different types of populations. On the left, you will note this is a African-American church. You can see the beautiful First Lady in her traditional African-American, very formal church attire. She's wearing her go-to-meeting clothes with a beautiful hat. And then on the right, this was expanded to local mosques as well. So you see the patients, and we have additional techs and workers. Some are wearing their beautiful hijabs. And again, why do we do this? We need to get out into the community. We need to show that we care. We need to be a visible presence wherever we have been planted. We need to make a difference. So what is tip number 2 that I would offer if you want to be a charismatic speaker and get out of the reading room? Well, you can offer to provide interviews on topics that are of current interest in the community. So I know you may be thinking, you know, I'm really not an expert. I don't know if I feel comfortable speaking on this, but this is what you need to keep in mind. Although you may not be an expert in every nuance of radiology, please keep in mind you have much more expertise than the general public. They will very much appreciate you being present, trying, and speaking to a topic that, again, you do have more information than they typically have on that topic. You can work with local community and civic organizations, and that will also help you create connections within the community. So now I'm going to give you some examples. So This is 2019. This is an example of me doing community outreach. So I am in the center, and you see that I'm surrounded by a lot of young women. And so I was asked to be a speaker and to speak about breast health, breast cancer awareness. And again, you see these applicants and I mean, the attendees, they are so excited. They are so excited that a physician has taken time out of their schedule to come, and the turnout is very good with these type of engagements. So what do? I engage communities that are going to be interested in what I have to say. But I encourage you to engage communities that are going to be interested in what you have to say. So that's an example of 2019, and I love to show this. And here's 2020. So we see that there has been a big change. So as you know, the COVID pandemic swept throughout the world, but there were still opportunities for community engagement. If you see on the left, we are doing local news interviews. On the right, we are doing the Susan G. Komen, which is a breast cancer awareness organization that is founded. It's in the United States, and it's spread throughout most of the United States, and there are local chapters. So I am a past president of the medical advisory board for the Susan G. Komen Houston organization. But here you see us all. We do a walk. That walk raises money for women that are uninsured. We have our masks on, we're doing interviews, but again, it's just community outreach, community engagement, showing that yes, we're here, we care, how can I help you? Then you get to 2021. Now it's more about the YouTube videos and what can we do online? How can we reach even more patients? So this was Breast Cancer Awareness 2021. I was asked to participate in a breast cancer presentation, and I was asked to pick the speakers. I reached out to 2 other physicians of color because I thought that it would be good for others to see their stories and their impact. The interesting part of this presentation is that Dr. Kim Robinson on the bottom left, she's an OB-GYN, and she refers many patients to me, but Dr. Martha Armstrong, who is the picture at the top right, she is a physician who came to me as a patient. She was 42 years old, getting her second mammogram. We saw some abnormal calcifications, and sure enough, it was cancer. She is now cancer-free. She has 4 small children. She and her husband are both physicians. But again, these are the type of stories that highlight what we do and why it's important to do what we do. In addition, when you broaden your base of who you are asking to participate, they are going to ask their contacts to watch the interviews. So we're slowly but surely casting a wider net and making it very clear. This is what breast imaging radiology does. This is the value that we offer here in our local community. So COVID offered a great opportunity because there were a lot of changes with breast radiology and COVID. Specifically, there was the first ever moratorium on screening mammography in the United States since screening mammography started in the 70s. So there was a lot of confusion. What do we do? Is it safe to get a mammogram? When do we go back? This is a prime opportunity to be visible, to start getting, you're going to be asked, we were asked to do interviews, we were asked to speak with patients, we were asked to do, and again, you may be thinking, you know, I'm not a talker. This is why I went into radiology. I just want to be, you know, I'm more comfortable in the reading room. But again, you are more of an expert than the general patient population. And you just speak on what you know, speak about what gives you your passion, and patients will see your dedication and they will see that you're genuine. That's what is most important. You will also have opportunities. COVID offered opportunities to talk about delays. And again, we were getting, I was getting lots of requests to speak on the internet, or can you do written, or can you do a radio interview? But it's very important. And I make sure that when I am doing these interviews, I make sure that I tie in topics that I am passionate about. So again, I mentioned that I'm very passionate about the underserved. So I made sure that in this interview, I specifically said that patients, if you look at the third paragraph down, another reason patients are still delaying their mammograms is because many have lost their jobs and they lost their health insurance during the pandemic. And that did disproportionately affect communities of color. This is this is what I am personally passionate about. So I feel that I have an obligation and an opportunity to speak up for those who otherwise do not have a voice. I made sure that I spoke about, and there were industries that people could not work from home. If you were in service industries, you had to keep going into work, even throughout the pandemic. We know that those sectors have higher proportions of minority workers. So again, these are patients that don't have health insurance. We do know that Black women are less likely to have cancer diagnosed at an earlier stage. And again, that's something I'm passionate about. So when I am asked to give presentations, can you speak here? Can you speak there? I make sure that I tie in topics that are important to me and that I feel need to be highlighted throughout the community. Also, you don't have to just stick to radiology stories about breast cancer per se. So this is an example of a community outreach that was done. So the Deborah Duncan Show is a local popular show in the Houston area. And this is a story about, I showed earlier, Dr. Kim Robinson. She's one of my work colleagues. She's an OB-GYN. And she's also a friend, but we spoke about how Kim had felt a lump under her arm. She called me, she came to clinic, and the long story short is it was a cancer. She actually had a lymphoma. And she had asked me to, when the results come back, no matter what, promise me you'll tell me the results and be honest. It was one of the most difficult conversations that I've had in my career, to tell a very close friend who at the time had two small children. She had a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And when I called her, she was screaming, crying, and all she could say was, "What about my children? What about my kids? Angel, what about my kids?" The good news is, fast forward, she is now cancer-free. She and her husband said, let's just try for one more. And she got pregnant with twins. So we were asked to be on a Mother's Day program. So again, feel good stories, any kind of story. But again, what are you passionate about? What is the story that you can tell in your community? The third point that I want to share with you is that you need to find allies. So we know that there is strength in numbers. What does that mean? You need to find strong allies. A strong ally is someone who is going to have a voice that potentially is going to reach a much larger audience than you can reach. But you need to find an ally who has similar ideals and goals to you. And why is this important? Because you can have a combined platform. You are already going to be reaching out to your platform, and then your allies are going to be reaching out to their platform. Combined, you're going to reach much more than you would alone. So I'm going to give an example of that. So Geraldine is on this talk, but this is how Geraldine and I met. I was working with the National Medical Association. She was giving a talk. The United States at that time was going through unprecedented social unrest. We really haven't seen anything similar to that than in the 60s for the civil rights movement. During that time, we had George Floyd, who had been murdered. We had Ahmaud Arbery, who had been murdered. And the United States had a lot of social unrest. After that talk, I went to Geraldine and asked her, she was the first female president of the ACR. So you have to imagine that we, meaning the women, and throughout, radiology were ecstatic and thrilled. But, it really burdened my heart that there was so much social unrest. And I asked her, can you please speak to this? Are you, with your platform, going to speak to this? And I am so thrilled that she said, absolutely. I absolutely will speak to this. So she gave a talk on embracing diversity and inclusion. She started the talk with us at University of Texas Medical Branch. And two, I'm just so pleased that she took on a topic that can be somewhat uncomfortable. If you look in the middle of this, she said, and these are Geraldine's words, she has emails that she sends out to her broad audience. She said, delivering such an important message as a privileged white woman when there is so much work to do might be perceived as presumptuous. I was candid with my audience about where I am on the journey to better understanding the impact of racism on both US society and the healthcare system. I'm paddling diligently in the learning zone, trying to be a better ally. So this is the slide that Geraldine sent out. So why was Geraldine McGinty the perfect advocate? Well, again, Geraldine McGinty was the first female president of the American College of Radiology. So by default, she must have been comfortable with being in a minority situation. So this is the perfect person to speak to this. I am not going to have the platform that Geraldine has. However, by mentioning a topic that was very near and dear to my heart, Geraldine could use her platform to reach many, many more people than I ever would have reached. You must find strong allies if you want your message to be broadcast. So when Geraldine sent this message, when she sent it out, I sent her a personal note, and I said, please don't stop, press on, run this race. So it's not one just walking in this fight alone. It is us. It is a we. And this is similar to, again, what was done throughout the civil rights movement. This yesterday in the United States was, we celebrated the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, who worked on civil rights, and he actually used a lot of the same techniques that he learned from Gandhi, that Gandhi had done in India. So my point being this, Dr. King, his message would have been diluted if he was just speaking with people who look like him. He had allies of all groups. He had allies of all genders, races, backgrounds. That is the same that we need to do with topics that we find important within radiology and broader. So finally on that, well, how else do we do community outreach? I like to recognize those who have come before me. So this is a picture with Dr. Patterson. She's in the middle. So Dr. Patterson was a president of the Mammography Society of Philadelphia. She was president of the Pennsylvania Radiology Society and a counselor for the ACR. She served as a radiology board examiner, but this is what is very important. In 1991, Dr. Patterson became the first African-American woman to become a fellow in the American College of Radiology. I started high school in 1992. So in 1991, she was breaking barriers. And now here's a picture with me standing next to her many years later. I am standing on those shoulders. And the reason that I mention that is this: for those who feel that, well, I'm kind of uncomfortable, I don't want to, get into certain topics, please don't forget many others have sacrificed and gone before you so that you can have the ease that you are now experiencing. So I really feel that it's our duty and our obligation to speak up and to get the word out. So in summary, it is imperative that we define the role of the radiologist for the broader patient population. So going back, thinking of that 2020 study that I just referenced, We know that less than half of the patients that were noted in that study even knew that a radiologist was a medical doctor. We also found that less than half of those patients could accurately state what a radiologist does. So what does that mean? It means that we have work to do. How can you do this work? You can become a connected radiologist. You can participate in community outreach opportunities in your local community. You need to find topics that are passionate to you, things that you connect with, and then you just take baby steps, one step at a time, one step at a time. Again, passion. Do not pick a topic that is not important to you, because patients, people, the community at large, 90% of communication is nonverbal. If you are speaking about something that you're not passionate about, it will absolutely show. You can start with local engagements, maybe your local community center, your local church, the local news, the local Rotary Club or similar clubs. There are groups right now, I guarantee, in your local community who would love to have a physician come and speak. We need to be visible. We have to get out of the reading room. We don't need people to think that even though our technologists, our front desk staff, they are wonderful, and without them, we cannot do our job. However, we have a different role. A lot of these patients are speaking with our front desk staff, with our technologists, and they think that that is the radiologist. We must get out of the reading room. Finally, you need to find strong allies. Who is a strong ally? A strong ally is someone who is going to have a bigger megaphone than you. So they are someone who are going to be able to reach many more people than you, but they are someone who aligns with your ideals. They align with your goals. So they will get that message out to a much broader patient population. So as a breast imaging radiologist, I cannot leave a talk without giving a little plug for breast imaging radiology. So why is breast imaging important? Because early detection means that we're going to have more breast cancer survivors. And here are pictures of some of my survivors who have who know they are included in some of my talks, and they were happy to participate. So these are all women that I've diagnosed with breast cancer. We're all patients. So we do breast imaging radiology for her. We do it for her. You see, she's very young. She invited me to her graduation, and I was happy to attend. We do it for her, and we do it for him as well. So these are all breast cancer survivors. I like to show that they are all smiling in these pictures. What we do is important. What we do has value. And we need to make sure that we are standing up and speaking for what we are passionate about. That is it. If there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Angel. That was a very inspiring talk, including telling us the step-by-step of how to go through it. I'm going to ask Sarita whether we have any questions, and we're going to introduce Charles to join this whole group of people. Very enlightening talk so far, but we're going to add one more dimension to this. And Charles Goh is a dual accredited radiologist for both diagnostic radiology as well as nuclear medicine, and is a consultant radiologist in the Department of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging in the Singapore General Hospital, and also Deputy Chief Medical Informatics Officer in SGH. He has an academic appointment as Clinical Assistant Professor in Duke NUS. He's most actively involved in the training of residents, a faculty member for the National Nuclear Medicine Residency Training Program, National Diagnostic Radiology Residency Training Program, and the National Family Medicine Residency Training Program, as well as the National Final Master of Medicine in Radiology, FRC preparatory course. Now, he has an education philosophy because he's passionate about education. Learners who are actively engaged in the education process learn best. And students should be challenged to push their boundaries with a safety net to fall back on should they stumble. He is currently serving on our administrative board of the Asian Oceanian School of Radiology on our AOSR Education Committee and is also Honorary Secretary of the Singapore Radiological Society. Welcome to the panel, Charles. Last but not least, let me check for the questions. No questions at the moment. We have a very, this is something I think which tends to be quite common in radiology, because the people who enter radiology tend to like to be in the back room. They like not to interact with people. So today we have just done something about pushing boundaries. And I have to say that both Geraldine and Angelica, both of you are breast imagers, and breast imagers are well known, just as I am, to tend to talk to patients more, including the person around the patient. So I'm just wondering now, how do we communicate more in different fields of radiology? Do you see any other area where you can encourage? I know Angelica talked all about finding something you're really passionate about. Anyone can speak first. Yeah.
Maybe I'll jump in, Evelyn, and say that I think there are a number of other subspecialties in radiology where we see more communication. Obviously, in our pediatric radiology space, because there's such a need to tailor the exam to the particular patient. You know, pediatric radiologists have to talk to the parents and have to build trust with the patients, right? And then also in interventional radiology, we're seeing interventional radiologists increasingly having a clinical practice. They're seeing patients before the procedure, they're following up patients afterwards. So they have to develop those clinical skills. I don't know, Angel, do you have any other ideas? I think those are the main areas.
Yes, I really think there's going to be a growing role for our body radiologists as well. And the reason I'm saying that is just sheer volume. If you think about going to the ED, so our emergency departments, most of those studies are going to either be chest or body, quite honestly. I feel like there's a burgeoning role. Now, the issue ends up being, how do you get out of the reading room because we're so busy? It is so busy. But some of the thoughts are, again, could there be a, we're going to have a meeting with the radiologist once a month where they're just getting out there and community engagement. We have a Chamber of Commerce. So they're often asking, to your point, Evelyn, the breast imagers to speak. But I think there is an opportunity to get the body imagers. Also, I think there's an opportunity. Many radiologists don't want to talk. So I was definitely that radiologist that some of my attendings were like, oh, Robinson's a talker, so that was very different. But that is something that we can use. So who is that person? Even if you're not that person, you can maybe read a few extra studies so that that person can get out of the reading room. So I do think that body imaging, there are a lot, because I don't think people understand broadly a lot of what we would consider basic information about a CT scan, about an MRI, about I had belly pain and they ordered some study. What does that mean? So I think there are a lot of opportunities in body imaging.
So by saying that, you're actually talking about allies that give each other time to go out there beyond the reading room, because you're right, there's just so much volume of work that most radiologists or even any other allied clinician here in this will feel that it's a waste of time, because they can't get the job done and then it piles up and then we come back, they go home later rather than go home earlier. So this one is going on to what Chansa talked about, that you need a very good supporting network. How does she not suffer from burnout when she has to do her radiology work, at the same time do her Med Women podcast, and then she's networking all the time, she's in all these mentoring programs, but at the end, she actually said that you need a very good supporting network. So maybe Chansa, you can expand a little bit on how you get this supporting network. How do you engage people to support you in what you do so that you have the time to do this?
Yeah, mostly in our society work, after my main works, and we organize meetings, usually in weekends. And in Mongolia, radiology doctors maybe more communicate with patients because we are usually general radiologists, and we do ultrasound by ourselves. So when we do ultrasound, we need to communicate with every single patient. Also, many patients came from another hospitals just for diagnosis. So we don't have a sufficient clinical information. So when we write a report, we have to contact with patients. And in our department, there are also 80%, maybe 80% is again female doctors and radiologists. Maybe technicians are more male. Yeah. So we're very easy to understand with each other. And yeah, our head of the department and president of the society is very supportive, and they gave us opportunity and time to make these works. Yeah, I really appreciate with that supportive team. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have actually from the president of your society encouraging this so that this culture pervades through Mongolia. I think, Charles, here you should jump in on nuclear medicine, because I think in nuclear medicine, you also do treatment, right?
Okay, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that was one of the things that was quite interesting for me. I think as a radiologist, before I went into my nuclear medicine training, we don't really see patients so much, especially as a diagnostic radiologist. So actually, it was quite refreshing. I think a lot of my younger colleagues, when they first come in and they have to run clinics and all that, that's something they're not used to, they're not expecting, but I think it's actually really, really rewarding. I think that's one of the parts of my practice that I actually find really enjoyable nowadays. Actually, I want to add one more thing. I wanted to just say how inspired I was by all the different talks. And I think it's really interesting to see the different sort of legal frameworks, cultural kind of aspects that influence how we can step outside of the reporting room. And I really like how everybody sort of covered something different. So Geraldine talked about speaking to patients after we've reported their scan. So this is more of a one-on-one, very private kind of engagement, telling people a patient you have reported a scan for. That's one mode of engagement. I think Chansal was talking about being visible to other clinicians, engaging with other colleagues in medicine, and talking about how that might look like different social media engagements and all that. And Angelica was talking about larger group engagements, going out into the community and finding something you're passionate about, speaking to the public in a larger group. And I think it's very important for us all as radiologists to understand that stepping outside of the reading room doesn't have to look one way or another. There's so many ways in which we can do it. We can find things that work for our cultural, our legal kind of background. Just to say, in Singapore, and I know that across Asia it's going to be different in for every country, but in Singapore, I think there is a general sentiment that they actually don't want radiologists to be talking to the patients so much. They worry that we might say something that might contradict what the clinician wants later, so on and so forth. But I would say that policies are changing, and there may come a time when they have no choice but to allow this. The reason why I say this is right now we have been sort of broadening access to our medical record, just like in the US where reports are being sent out. Right now, they've actually put a bit of a moratorium. So even when they finally start releasing the reports to patients, they wanted to have a delay before the reports are released on these platforms so that clinicians could meet their patients and explain the results in person before they just handed the report. But I would say that time, culture, and law is changing, so we need to be actively engaged in that way. I'll just briefly mention how our society has tried to engage patients more. I think we used to have our annual scientific meeting, and every year only radiologists would show up and radiologists would speak to radiologists. We'll talk about scan findings, etc. But then we started to broaden it. And I think that's one way that we can also. We started inviting clinicians, surgeons, for example, if you're talking about breast imaging, or even, for example, we talked about body imaging. So for our liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinomas, for example, we started inviting surgeons to give their perspective. What do they want to hear in the report? What do they think about when they are reading the report? And so how can we communicate better with them? And not only as speakers, we started having them come in as participants as well, so they can see what we do, the kind of difficulties or challenges that we have, and then we start that engagement. And finally, one last thing we started doing was we started having patient seminars as well. And we realized once we started it, patients really want to hear. So as a side thing, it started off as a small side thing. We ran sessions on uterine fibroids, thyroid nodules, or even understanding breast imaging like mammography and ultrasound. And the turnout's always been fantastic. And we get really good support from our medical society as well in terms of funding. And it's really taught us that there's so many ways to engage patients, so many ways to engage outside the reading room, directly with patients, but also in our interactions with clinicians, because communication is so important. Anyway, I went on for a bit. I'm just going to stop here.
No, you are sharing some things and another different ways in which we can engage with the community, not just the patient layman, but actually a layperson, sorry, or more layperson, professional colleagues, the allied health colleagues, as well as our own profession. It's usually talking to ourselves, we don't really grow as much, because we do not realize how people perceive us and whether what we say is what they want to know. But I want to thank Angelica for sharing Geraldine's story, how the both of you got together. And if I may borrow what you said about the fear zone, the learning zone, and the growth zone to apply to radiologists who are afraid to step out beyond the reading room. Would you like to use that, that model to see how we can do better? And then I want to follow that after you all have made the comment. Charles, I want you to talk about how do we put this into the curriculum. You are very much involved in curricula. You're very much in, your passion is educating. So how can we put this into, because I find that telling a radiologist of 10, 20 years out to that they need to go back to talking to patients, it's not going to be something that is easy to do. Well, I have to say that we get set in our ways. So yeah, take Geraldine.
Angel, I'll let you take a first go at that.
Well, I like in terms of the zones, I think we all need to stretch. So if we think a little bit about it, when we started medical school, one of the analogies they say is it's like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. You know, it's a lot of information. It's overwhelming. You have times thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get through this, you know, but then you look and you graduate and you say, wow. And then you go through the same thing again with boards and residency. Whoa, this is too much. So I think we need to think of it in a similar way. We are going to have to stretch a bit. So it may seem daunting. It may be in the fear zone at the beginning, but I think starting small. So in starting small is you're going to start with groups that you think are going to, welcome you. So your local, your friend is in some sort of organization and they say, my book club wants a speaker. There's no reason you can't speak at a book club. There's absolutely no reason. And then from there, someone hears you and says, hey, what about this? What about this? I don't think that the goal should be, I want to end up meeting the president of the American College of Radiology. The odds, I mean, it was just like, well, this is pretty random. But I do think that the goal should be to take one step at a time, and you just keep taking the next step. So starting in something where you are comfortable in, a plant grows where it's planted. So wherever you're planted, take a step there, but don't think that it's going to be, it's normal that it can be a little bit uncomfortable, as was medical school, as was residency, as are our careers, and everything, most things that we do that have substance are going to be a bit of a stretch for us. So don't be scared to stretch. Don't be scared to mess up. Don't be scared. You know, the biggest mistake is just by standing there doing nothing.
Very good. Thank
That-
you.
I couldn't agree more. Evelyn, let me pick up on your second question about the learning. And, you know, you were alluding when we were chatting at the beginning about the way we were trained was this sort of apprenticeship method. We would follow our professors around, and some were good, some were not so good. So I think we have to take a very intentional approach to communication because it is a real skill. I've been fortunate in my institution, and then in our radiology department, we have a simulation lab. So we've actually, we have sessions where we sit with, dumb, fake patients, like actors, or even our colleagues who train to be patients. And we understand the words that will make for a good communication. I'll give one example. For, the first, 30 years of my career, I would ask the patient, do you have any questions? I learned to reframe that as, what questions do you have? That made a powerful difference in the patient's willingness to open up to me and ask me questions, because the very small change in the wording said, I want to hear your questions, not, do you have any questions? Because I'm in a hurry. What questions do you have? I'm here, I'm waiting. And I would never have known that. I thought I was a good communicator. The intentional training, the scheduling of time to do it was so important.
Yeah, so maybe I'll jump in and say, regarding education, I think the very first thing that we need to do for our residents is first to convince them of the value of it. I think one of the biggest problems that we face in radiology education is that people value knowledge about how to interpret scans because they know it'll help them to pass exams. So I think when they do that, it's just like a lot of our students are very clever. They know exactly what they need to do to get through. So when they look at something like communication, they're like, yeah, I guess that sounds important, but not really. I think one way we can do it as educators is sometimes to include communication skills as part of the assessment. Because, that's one of the first things. But beyond that, I think we need to convince them of what the real value is. Because I believe there is real value in communication that actually goes beyond your clinical acumen sometimes, or even your knowledge. Because that kind of communication at all levels with your referring clinicians, with your patients, is going to make you a better radiologist. I'll give you an example. I gave this presentation about communication of doubt and certainty in radiological reports, because there are different levels of communication. I always teach my residents that our report actually is a primary means in which we communicate with both our patients as well as the referring doctors. And if you can't even do that right, then what's the point? Even if the radiologist knows exactly what he's talking about, if the clinician who reads it has no idea what you're talking about, then you've failed. You've failed in your report, and actually the patient is going to suffer as a result. And there were some papers that were published looking at actually how radiologists interpret certain words they use and how clinicians interpret those very same words. Like, for example, measures of certainty. This is possible, this is likely, this is probable. How many % confidence do we have as a radiologist when we write that versus what the clinician believes for the same word? And I think something as simple as that, sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down with your clinician and saying, this is what I'm going to write in my report. What do you understand about it? Actually, what do you want from your report? I always tell my residents that as well. Always think about not just reporting every scan the same, but have you considered who is the doctor referring? What is it, a specialist? Is it somebody from general practice? And what kinds of information do they need? I mean, if we think about that, that's how we become a better radiologist. And that's just simply on the reporting standpoint. Oral communication is a different thing. I think we talked a little bit about role models and learning from an apprenticeship kind of fashion. I think the unfortunate thing is that because for so many years we've been stuck in the reading room, sometimes it's hard to find good examples of that, I'll be honest. How our hospital has done it is sometimes to bring in external people to help with communication. And some of these things can be taught. Some of them have to be caught. But I do think that at least if you start the process going, we can go somewhere. So yeah, that's what I had to say about that.
So Charles, dial that back to say in other words, during training. And Geraldine has already mentioned it has to be very intentional. And she's right. Do you have any questions versus what questions do you have can make such a great impact? So we all think we can speak, but actually we are not good communicators. We are actually telling people what we think they want to know, but not actually what they want to know. So what can you do about the curriculum? And what do you foresee? I'm not, putting you in a corner. Just what do you see as an educator at the level of residency?
I think you said something really, really apt and very wise, which is that we are telling people what they want, what we think they want. I think one thing that we need to realize is that communication, a big part of it is being able to listen. I think Geraldine kind of alluded to that when she said, how do you ask that question? Do you communicate that you're willing to listen, that you want to listen? Or are you communicating that you're in a hurry, that you need to get back to your reporting room to read another scan, that you don't have time? And I think, yeah, it is important to make space. I think if you have a pile of scans waiting for you and then you go out to speak to a patient, they'll sense it. I think Angelica talked about how you need to be passionate about something. A lot of the communication that we have is in body language. People see that, people know that. Unfortunately, this is something that's a bit difficult to teach in that sense. But I think if it's in our residents' minds, at least they begin to think about that. And when you asked about curriculum, I do think there are actually a lot of techniques that people can learn. Some people are a bit more natural in terms of communication, but I think we all recognize a lot of us came into radiology because we didn't particularly like to talk to people. So I do think that some of these skills can be taught, and there are plenty of different sort of schemas or ways that people can teach communication, both in terms of how you phrase the question, to even finer things like when you ask a question, do you count a few seconds? Do you wait for a response? I mean, these are things that don't come naturally to a lot of people, but if you're mindful about it and you practice it enough, it becomes habit, and then it becomes part of who you are as a communicator. So I think, yeah, I think for me, really, the first point is the value. I think if the educators see value in something, once again, the students will realize that it's valuable. And so I think it starts with all of us as educators. Do we see value in communication? Because if we don't, then our students are not going to see it. Our residents are not going to see it. Yeah.
So how are you going to ensure that the educators value communication? In other words, to have an actual formal module with role-playing simulation in the training program for residents so that they become better radiologists. And by the way, continue talking. We're just flashing out the QR code for the feedback form because our previous attendees kept saying they never saw it. So now we are making it quite obvious. So this is for the attendees to get the feedback form done. And the doctor will send you by email your certificates of participation. So Charles, I need you to answer that because you are an educator who believes in communication. I can feel that in you. So how are you going to communicate it to the rest of your faculty so that it becomes a module in training? I think it's important for someone to set the precedent, and then like dominoes, all the rest of the training programs will start seeing, hey, we don't want to be left out. Someone has started training program. They're better communicators. They're producing better radiologists. They're producing visible and valued radiologists.
So for us, I mean, locally at least, when we shifted actually from our older sort of British model to the residency training, we actually started looking at things outside of clinical knowledge. And these were different domains that were actually introduced into our training program. So I would say communication is already a part of that. It includes other things like looking at healthcare economics a little bit as well, understanding that, I think it was also alluded to earlier, the cost of healthcare is rising and radiology is certainly a part of that. So there are actually all these other elements that we have included formally in our training program under like the core competencies, which we actually learned from the US. I think in Asia, it's only beginning to catch on. I think a lot of times we really do value sort of the hard science. And that's often what's emphasized. And unfortunately, that is actually part of most of our formal testing. If you look at something like even the FRCR exam, which is very widely used, the bulk of it is actually how well do you interpret scans, how well do you pick up findings and the like. Communication is a very important part of it, but it's not a focus. How it's happened for our residency is actually there are other assessments beyond these sort of what we call summative assessments. There are formative assessments that we use for the purposes of education, or communication. And actually we have included it in our exit examinations. So our final examinations, we have actually other components as well. Unfortunately, some of the role-play scenarios we include sometimes are things like, how do you speak to a patient who's had a bad experience, like extravasation or something? How do you take consent from patients? These are all important aspects. I think if you're talking about a formal educational syllabus, there are plenty out there, but I think it's important for us to look at different aspects of communication. So things like breaking bad news, things like consent taking, these are all different dimensions or aspects of communication. And I think beyond patient and radiologist communication, we also need to emphasize talking about clinician and radiologist communication. So when we plan out scenarios, when we look at assessments, we have to consider all these aspects and test them and then correct. But it's going to be a long process because I think all of us are learning along the way as well. I think the whole world of radiology has been learning. In the past 10 years, there's been a shift in terms of how we view ourselves as radiologists. I would say beyond the educational part of it, it's going to be quite important for hospital administrators to start to value some of this as well. Because sometimes when we measure the output of a radiologist, we look purely in terms of how many scans come out. And so how can you blame people for not valuing things like participating in multidisciplinary rounds or calling your clinician to ask them? I always tell my residents, when you write clinical correlation is required, that doesn't mean that you absolve yourself of any responsibility. First of all, have you even stopped to ask, what do you want to know? Number one, is it available in the record? Have you considered picking up the phone and calling your colleague? And then you won't have to write clinical correlation because you just did it. So I think sometimes we need to ask ourselves how we practice. Sometimes there are shortcuts we take when actually other ways could be much better. Yeah.
Okay, time is coming up, but I would like to just reframe why we call clinicians clinicians. They are non-radiology doctors, because radiologists are also clinicians. We are all medical doctors. So we should also stop using words that are self-defeating. So if we call ourselves clinicians, they are just non-radiology colleagues of ours. Chancellor, you have been very quiet, so I'm going to ask you to say a few words before I ask everyone to give their final parting messages. Chancellor, I think you have quite a lot of interesting, different experience from Mongolia. So do you have anything to add about the training, as well as, I know like Malaysia, we do our own ultrasound, so we do talk to patients a lot, but not necessarily in the correct way. I've had patients who say that the radiologist scared them to death because of the way we spoke. So Chancellor.
In residency program in Mongolia, until now, it's only 2 years residency program. Now it's getting to change in 3 years. And in our residency years in nuclear medicine and interventional radiology, and also radiation is very short. It continues only 2 weeks or just 1 month. And after residency program, they specialize in interventional radiology and nuclear medicine and something like that. Yeah, so yeah, maybe it's a little bit different from other countries. Yeah, otherwise, I don't know exact differences. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask everyone to sum up your parting message for today. So let's start with Charles.
I think the one message that was very clear throughout this entire webinar is really that all of us can become better communicators, and regardless of our culture and our where we are, which country we are in, we can find different ways in which we can communicate better with our patients, with other doctors, with each other, and with the public at large. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Angel.
I will end with one of the more famous quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King was that the man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. So you have to stand for something. Speak about what you're passionate about. Use your platform. It's not about the number of people who attend or don't attend. It means something to the person that's hearing your message. So just take that first step.
So in other words, if you can just change one person's mindset or life, you have made a difference. Thank you very much. And so, Chansa, your final message to your audience tonight.
Yeah, thank you for joining with us today. And working with other doctors, non-radiology doctors, and they are happy to collaborate with us, and also they share their time to the society. It is over my expectation with my volunteer works. So maybe we need to actively communicate with other doctors and nurses and other health professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. So you're still really very passionate about communicating with your medical professional colleagues. And Geraldine, your passing message.
Thank you. So the value of radiology has always been clear. For the value of radiologists to be as clear, we need to be visible.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone in the audience for listening. I know you have been a little bit quiet. Nobody had any major questions to share. So either that, you all were very, very clear and inspiring. I hope that everyone, no matter which area of the world you're from, we will take back some messages. Very good sharing from Angel, who woke up very early today. She's from Texas, so I think it was what, 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. And Geraldine was also very early in the Eastern time. And for the rest of us, it's towards the end of the day. We thank you very much for spending your time with us. And we hope to see you back at the next AOSR webinar. We will announce that. The next one is actually, there's one coming up on AI and the applications of AI, which is very important because everybody is starting to sell AI to us. But we are hoping AI will give us more time to spend more time with our patients and our clinicians. Thank you very much. Good night. I will ask the speakers to please stay back after we go off live stream.
Sure, ma'am. I'm ending the session, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you. Ma'am, I have stopped the live stream. Should I pause the recording?
Yes, please.